Welcome to the New to UTK video series on regulations and resources. In this part of the series, we will focus on structuring collaboration with young learners. We will be discussing engagement and activities for collaborative centers in the classroom.
We wanted to talk around is structures to promote collaborative centers. And we came up with, you want to head to the next slide, Helen? We came up with 3 substructures, some routine, thinking about routines, thinking about visuals, and thinking about how to teach the language for those structures. And one of the things we wanted to highlight is the idea of using those routines and having them well established. So thinking about consistent routines that you want to have throughout your school day is super important, so that children know what to expect and what language they need to use during those times. Another thing that we want to remind you about is the visual reminders. Whenever you have materials around the room, for example, your play structures, you want to make sure that you have visuals, not only for the the location of the items that they may be working with, but also visuals so that they remember how to participate in those centers. For example, cleanup, right? Reminding them to have the cleanup in different spots. The other thing that you want to remember is the expectations in these centers. So, what are the expectations in the dramatic play area as far as behavior? Obviously sharing, right? But also using peers and using your co-teacher to help teach them the language around that and how to have those interactions. One of the things we talked about as a team was the idea of sharing versus turn taking, right? So if you're, that's a kind of a nebulous concept for our students, but if you teach them that sharing is, I get one, you get one, I get one, you get one, for those items that are multiple. But, turn taking may be the idea that you are teaching them that I get my turn first and then you get a turn, right? So that first then language and teaching them and helping them practice that. So that is one idea that we wanted to share with you about around routines and procedures and using visuals. The other thing we wanted to remind you was that you want to have those routines and visuals for songs. So if you are having them go and rotate from one station to the next, you'll want to have a song or a chant that you use with students. If you want to get their attention, you want to have those other thing we wanted to mention is teaching them the language. So again, the turn taking is one idea of using that language of what it means to take turns, either physically dividing up the item or saying my turn first, then you get a turn, and possibly using a timer, either a sand timer or a digital timer that sets off. I know a lot of you, when you're out at recess, you have the students for taking turns on the swing, you have them counting right up to a certain number. So helping them learn that. The other thing, and I know Second Steps dips into this a lot, as well as the ELA and the social emotional learning standards and the preschool learning foundations, talk a lot about, using your language, right? How do you express yourself when you're upset, or when you want to take a turn, or when someone has done something to you? So using that I felt, fill in the blank, when you, and have them have those conversations, and then having them practice that with a peer. And oftentimes it's really important that we do this work when they're not in an escalated or an upset mode. So, doing it during a second step lesson or during your carpet time, or, outside of the moment is super important that we do that work.
Is talking about the fair ways to play. And it talks about trading things with each other or taking turns. And there's also the fair ways to play song. And when you look in your kit, there's this book, if you haven't noticed before. It's this spiral bound book. And in the very front pocket, when you open it up, there's actually a CD here the kids can listen to. And I've also found the songs online on YouTube. So if you can't play a CD anymore, which I don't know if you can or not, but they are great songs that the kids can use that you can do fair ways to play, song. It gives ideas, the kids will pick it up. Really, really great songs for the social emotional learning.
The things we were talking about is supporting our students whose language may be emerging still, or it may be developing. And so how do we engage them in these types of activities and promote their language? And so how many of you are familiar with this scoreboard? If you have an SLP in your room, you may have seen this already. The core board, it's 440. These are high frequency words that we might use in our vocabulary. And so they are considered, if we're interacting with our students and we're doing play with them, or we're engaging in turn taking type activities, one of these words will probably apply to what we are doing in that activity. So when we're working with our students, thinking about what Allison was just talking about taking turns, we might say my turn. And we're using this core board to support some of that language because it's a paired visual that will support the students. So if you see on the board, there is my or me. Sometimes they're used interchangeably, and you can do my turn, which is the little rotating wheel. It's hard to see, these are really small, but it is linked. There is an opportunity for you to go onto our website and get one of these boards that you can use in your classroom. And what we do is we just model this for our students. So if we're engaging in a sharing activity, you might say with the student, you would point to the actual board and you would say like my turn, or your turn. And we use you. They don't worry so much about the grammatical structures. You would say you turn, help me, like it, right? So all of those things that other students might be engaging in more complex language during the play. If our students need more supported language, we would be modeling using this board and pointing to it as we are modeling for the students. That is like our superpower for our students, is models. That helps. And so this is just one more layer to model with. And this is accessible for anybody. And I always put a plug in if this is something that you find that your students in your classroom may benefit from. Contact your speech language pathologist. They can get you all set up with this. They can show you how to use it the most effectively. And we often say that, and I want to make sure I get it right. We model this without expectation, meaning we're not going to expect students necessarily to take this on immediately and begin using this as the way that they communicate right away. This would be our model to be able to show the students how to communicate using this. And then we just kind of meet the students where they are as they grow and develop and learn how to use this type of support. For example, our students might need some visual supports to be able to express how they're feeling. So if they're in like that collaborative structured play activity, or that the structured rotations that you have with them, and we're talking about how they're feeling in that moment, they might need something like this. I feel happy, they're having fun playing. Or if, somebody took a toy away or they didn't take a turn, they might feel sad because that person didn't take the turn. So this is a great visual that you can use to help support students to be able to express those feelings in those moments. This one, you may not need in this particular moment that we're talking about, but it's kind of the next step. So if the student says, I feel sad, what do they need? Well, in the case that we just gave, they want to turn, right? They want to share, they want some kind of interaction, but they also might need something different. They might need a break, or they might need help. Maybe they need help with the activity that they're engaging with the other student with. So these are just some more simple visuals to help students be able to express how they're feeling in that activity. And then if there is something that they need, this would be a way for them to be able to express that as well. But as Holly said, I completely agree. We want to model this all the time, not just when there is a moment that there is a dysregulated state where they're feeling, we want to teach them how to use this when they're able to do it in a different space.
In second step, this card talks about how to introduce. They do the warm up, brain builder, my turn, your turn. And then a story and discussion about, think how Javon feels. He feels, and then you lead them to talking about being left out and how to be included and that type of thing. And so what is Javon feeling? What's the problem here? So these are great to pull out even as your event or something comes up, we all call them teachable moments, right? And I know, like, as a parent, you're gonna do the same thing. You pull out of your hat, oh, this is a great teachable moment to teach you about problem solving and exploring consequences, or problem solving and thinking of solutions. So remember your second step. It has a lot of great stuff in there, especially those songs. They're a really good beat and the kids really like them.
Can I jump in there too, just to start to weave in some of those visuals that I shared earlier? So like, for example, that card that had like he feels, and then it had the visuals for like the 6 different emotions. So for your students who require that layer, that scaffolded layer of support, you could have, you know, you're looking at this picture, that visual where it says, I feel, or, you know, something like that, you could be asking, how do you think the boy feels? And that's just one more way that a student can tell you how a person or a character or something is feeling if they don't yet have the language to say that spontaneously or independently. So that's another way those can, we say put the visuals everywhere, because they benefit all students, but they especially benefit our students who need that extra layer, extra scaffold.
Know what kind of centers you can set up in your classroom and have available to your students to promote this kind of opportunity to use language. And obviously the number one center that probably all of you thought of immediately is the idea of dramatic play, right? And the opportunity for them to take on the roles of various people. You know, maybe they're the mom or the dad, or today I was over at Lafayette and they had doctors, quite a few doctors working on each other in a corner. So taking on those various roles and, you know, learning how to have conversations in those real life settings can be invaluable to our youngest learners. I think it's invaluable to any learner, but our youngest learners in particular, right? Because it gives context and meaning to what they're doing and how they're communicating and using their words. The other thing that, you know, I haven't seen as much in the classrooms are doll houses. And, you know, we were just talking today at a school site, you know, it's the end of the year. Sometimes principals have some extra money that they kind of need to use up by a certain date. If you don't have a dollhouse, I've seen the classrooms that I have seen them in, the language and the interaction between students and the dialogue is just priceless. And again, you're giving them another opportunity to use daily conversation and daily communication in a very safe, very fun setting. So dollhouses are another option for your classroom to promote this collaborative talk. And then reenacting stories. You know, we just did a deeper thinking session earlier in the week, and you know, reenacting stories, having them, you know, if, the 3 Little Pigs, I love it. I was at Cabrillo. They actually have 3 cardboard boxes of the 3 different little pig houses, and they had puppets, and the kids were eating it up. Just reenacting that story, having conversation, making up their own words for the characters in this story, really powerful and really wonderful way to work on literacy and conversation and collaboration. The Block area, we you know, may not always think of the Block area as a great collaborative, but it is, right? And think about how many of the kids are building things together. So helping them have conversation around what they're building and how they're doing it. You know, that is a beautiful place. And sometimes you probably have a few students who gravitate towards that center more than any other center. So helping them have collaborative conversations. And this is one of those places where you may want to limit the number of materials they have available so that they have to do some of that collaboration and that sharing. And then engage with them. So whenever they're doing any of these centers, it's incredibly important. And this is the power of that co-teaching, right? Is that you're weaving in and out and you're having those conversations. A while back, I was at NIE and this one little guy I hadn't heard talk too much. He was on the phone. So I picked up my pretend phone and I had a whole conversation with him, and I couldn't believe how much he was talking and elaborating, you know, which is a higher level language skills. So it was just beautiful. So, you know, your engagement with them in these centers and promoting that language from a very expert level and getting them talking is invaluable. And I think our
But having the opportunity for kids to try on language through, like what you were saying, dialogue and practicing through the puppets, or even when we do book readings, we might, instead of asking, you know, how are the characters feeling, we might start with, what do you think the character is saying inside of his head right now, right? Because we're having them take on the thinking of the character in a different way than having to kind of synthesize it and be able to speak to it in a more, what's the word I'm looking for?
high level.
Yes, thank you, high level. The inferential piece. And so we're still getting them to start to think like a character, and they can talk like a character, but that seems to be an effective strategy for students. And similarly, you might see that with the puppets, right? Like, well, why don't we try on what we think this character might be doing by being a puppet and being that character, and they're able to take on that language. So it's definitely a great strategy and highly engaging. They love it.